Welcome, Lemonsterites, to the June episode of Representing Leominster with your state representative, Natalie Higgins. I am really excited to have filmed a segment that I'm pretty sure we haven't done before. And so, one of my favorite parts of my job is getting to work with some pretty amazing people. And the most amazing people are the interns that come and work with us. And we are hosting this summer 3 graduate students that are really exceptional. So I invited them on. They are just a few weeks into their internships, and I really wanted them to highlight kind of how they found their way to our office and what they're working on this summer. And you will see a whole lot more of the work that they're doing kind of throughout the summer on our social media. So get ready to meet Ty, Emily, and Adrianna. Welcome back. We're here with Ty Christoph Tempesta, and I'm really, really excited to have Ty working with us this summer. Ty, can you tell the Leominster viewers a little bit about your background, what you're studying, and how you ended up working with us this summer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a fourth-year PhD student at MIT in the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. I'm working on developing new materials to remove contaminants from water, especially things like lead and arsenic, heavy metals that we don't want in our drinking water streams. Outside of that, I've done a lot of work around LGBTQ plus inclusion in academic spaces, and I've done a bit of work around alternatives to single-use plastics, both at MIT and in some previous lives as well.
That's awesome. And I will say, when we host interns and fellows from your program, Isabel and I don't have science backgrounds, so we're always really interested in learning what you're learning about and studying and working in, because it is a little outside of the scope of what we usually get to experience.
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of my motivation for kind of doing the program, is that I think throughout a lot of my scientific journey, I've really seen science portrayed as something where you have a question and you get sort of a cut and dry answer, and there's never really a lot of overlap seen there with public policy, where there can often be sort of mini answers to the same question. And I think since I've been at MIT, I've actually realized quite to the opposite. There's a lot of room for science in public policy. And so I think being a part of this fellowship to start to combine those and learn how you can help the public through science has been really cool to do.
Yeah. And so this fellowship pairs scientists in graduate school with legislators. And for me, it's really helpful to kind of demystify the legislative process, especially in Massachusetts, but also to learn from you all. And our first fellow we hosted was last summer, and we agreed to host them in December of 2019. And we're like, what are we going to do with this like scientist in our office? And then COVID happened. So we kind of really got to hit the ground running with this amazing fellow helping us understand COVID-19 and all of the responses, and writing responses to our constituents who had a lot of questions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's been cool this year as well. They've expanded the program to MIT. It's traditionally done through Harvard Medical School, where there's a lot of people working in public health. And so I think it's kind of cool that it captured an even broader range of scientists. But I think something that I've also come to appreciate since I've been here is that there's sort of a skill set you learn as scientists that's sort of more broadly applicable to a variety of topics outside of what you're working on. And so I imagine that person may have not worked on anything COVID related before, as none of us likely had. But they were learning as they went along, and I think I'm kind of doing the same thing as well.
Yeah. And I was so excited to host you in particular because of your focus on material sciences and Leominster's history as the pioneer plastic city. I think we really connected on the role that Leominster can play kind of in the environmental movement of looking at green technology, bioplastics, kind of other ways that we can come into the 21st century. And we have a lot of manufacturers who are already doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I've been researching kind of since I've started in the office, is looking at what those manufacturing capabilities are and seeing that Leominster certainly has started to shift towards developing biodegradable plastics, which is a really exciting area for plastics right now. When you have a plastic material and you want to get rid of it, you can either throw it in the trash where it loses its value, you can recycle it. But even in that case, There's a lot of problems with recycling infrastructure right now. And so having this additional end of life option, which is biodegradation, is a really cool pathway for plastics to go down. And sort of wherever they end up, they have a way to recycle their carbon back into the environment to be used again. And so it's cool to be working on and looking into that type of plastic material, particularly seeing as it's coming out of Leominster itself.
Yeah. And so you're joining us kind of at this pretty much the start of a legislative cycle. So the Massachusetts legislature runs for 2 years. We got through our bill filing shortly before you all joined us. And then now hearings are really starting to pick up. So you're getting to go to a lot of hearings, briefings. They're all happening virtually still. And you're getting to watch a few sessions. And so is there anything that surprised you in terms of what you've experienced so far?
Yeah, definitely. I think for one, I think sort of expanding on that idea of using science beyond what I've already worked on. I've been excited to sort of sit in on briefings around generally science-related legislation that's definitely outside my field. And so, especially as Massachusetts looks to meet some of its targets around reducing carbon emissions, looking at or going to the briefings around those types of bills that are very outside my typical regime, but are still very accessible as a scientist, I think has been useful, and to work on summarizing those. I think something that unrelated to all that has been generally surprising is that I think as a member of the public or as a constituent, representatives are often sometimes seen as being sort of far away. And so what's been really cool to see is that representatives are actually very, very accessible. And it's been nice to kind of work in your office and see the constituent service side of things, which I think is perhaps an underappreciated side of public policy, where a lot of representatives are really accessible.
Yeah, and it differs from office to office. And one of the things that we kind of figured out last summer and have really continued with and is working really well is kind of having that first hour of the day as like a really formal check-in to say, like, what did you experience yesterday? What questions do you have? And it's good for me and Isabel to check in with you all to say, like, does it make sense what we're doing? Like, are there better ways for us to do what we're doing? With just a 2-person office, it can be really hard to tackle all of the big ideas that we have. So we're so thankful to have especially graduate students join us and for as many weeks, months that you're with us, kind of add to our capacity to take on these projects. And for me, as an admirer of environmental policy, but it is not my wheelhouse, to really start to dig into things like how to retrofit multifamily homes, single family homes to be net zero in gateway cities. And that's a piece of legislation that I'm excited to have you kind of dig in a little bit more about. How do we just bring this to be more practical for everyone who lives in our Commonwealth, no matter what community you live in?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's been a really cool part to see as well, is that sometimes the background that I bring to the table is the science and sort of the scientific background. So, I've been learning about things like heat pumps and better electrical sources of heating and cooling, but it's really interesting to see the social side of these problems come into it as well, like recognizing that there's populations who need assistance to transition to those types of systems, and seeing the role that the state plays in helping a kind of everyone move along this journey together.
Yeah. And so we're really excited to have you with us this summer. We wanted to really highlight the 3 of you at the beginning of the summer, and hopefully our constituents will see a lot of the work product that you're putting out throughout the rest of the summer. And I'm hoping by the end of legislative session that we'll see some bills that you actually worked on kind of get over the finish line. So I just want to thank you for taking some time to chat with me and introduce yourself to my constituents. And we're really, really thankful for your willingness to work with us this summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Welcome back, and I'm super thrilled to be joined by Emily Dillon, our law student fellow for the summer. Emily, could you tell us a little bit about what you're working on in your professional life and how you ended up in our office?
Sure. So I am a second-year JD-MSW candidate at UMass Law in conjunction with Bridgewater State, and I'm one of 12 Rappaport Legal Fellows through the Rappaport Center for Law and Public Policy in affiliation with BC School of Law. My primary focus and passion is working with and advocating for survivors of abuse, and that's because I'm a survivor myself. My experience in rebuilding my life after intimate partner violence led me to this calling. I had dreamed of being a lawyer since I was a little girl, but I lost sight of that goal in my early 20s. About 2 years after I left my relationship, I returned to school to achieve said goal, first earning my associates from Massasoit Community College and then my bachelor's from UMass Dartmouth before proceeding on to law school. It's been quite a journey.
A girl after my own heart, public higher ed all the way. We both are survivors and working to protect survivors. I just am so thrilled. And I also was a Rappaport fellow. So there's just so much that we are so excited to be hosting you this summer.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And so how has your time been at UMass Law? I will admit I'm a little jealous. I went to Northeastern and I love and would never trade my time at Northeastern, but UMass Law was just getting started when I went to law school.
It's been great. It's been interesting starting law school in a pandemic, particularly doing it virtually. But oddly, I had done both of my previous programs online. So for me, the challenge wasn't quite as strong as it might have been for some of my colleagues. But I'm loving it. I just found out that I will be admitted off the waitlist into the domestic violence course for next semester, which is awesome.
That's awesome.
And one of my colleagues who's also a Rappaport fellow and I are working on bringing a trauma-influenced interviewing workshop to the campus for next fall and spring. It's going to be a 2-part series. So I'm really excited about that. I find that the faculty and staff are very, very supportive.
What an awesome, awesome skill to be learning in law school, like really incredibly important.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about why you wanted to be a Rappaport fellow, and we could talk a little bit about what we're working on this summer together.
Sure. So when I came to law school, I had thought that I was going to be able to help maybe 1 or 2 survivors, just a small handful. And I figured that that would be enough. And once I started getting involved with the Women's Bar Association, they had proposed a bill to promote anti-discrimination workplace protections for survivors of abuse. And I kind of saw what was possible on a larger scale, right? Like I had thought that I was going to do close connected client work, which I still want to do. But then I saw that I could expand that focus and help all of the survivors in our Commonwealth, truly. And that was fabulous. And I started to open my eyes to the world of public policy. And I had actually heard about the fellowship prior to applying to law school. And I thought, maybe I should explore this. I should look into this a little bit more. And through my courses, as we talked about public policy, I realized that it was something I really wanted to pursue. So I went for it.
The Rappaport Fellowship is an incredible opportunity for folks interested in public service because it's really hard to find paid work working for either a government internship or a nonprofit internship. And so it really helps folks be able to take advantage of those work opportunities.
Definitely. It has been an awesome experience for me working in your office. So thank you.
Well, we're super excited. So I'm really, really proud to be named one of the new co-chairs of the Sexual Violence Working Group under the Mass Caucus of Women Legislators with Rep. Minicucci. And so Emily is really taking the lead in our office this summer to one, you've already tracked all of the legislation related to sexual violence and domestic violence so we can get it into one place. But the other really amazing role that this working group had when I came into the legislature 5 years ago was kind of a convening authority to bring together all of those service providers every other month to really share ideas, what's coming up, what challenges are they experiencing. And we just didn't realize how little they actually cross collaborate, right? Because they're doing their work in their own communities. And often we don't take that time to kind of get together and learn from each other. And for us as legislators, there's no better way than to learn from the folks who are on the ground doing this work about how we can make our legislation stronger, be better advocates. So I'm really excited to have you working with us in the Mass Caucus of Women Legislators this summer, because we have these big dreams of things we want to take on and often don't have the capacity. So having these graduate student fellows is just really important for us. And so you've been with us for a couple of weeks. Is there anything surprising or notable about the Massachusetts State Legislature in the short time you've been with us so far?
Yes, well, I kind of expected it coming in, but what has both taken me by surprise and not taken me by surprise is how much everybody cares, right? Like, you expect that your legislators are going to care about you. I mean, that's why they go into public service, but listening to how passionately you, as well as others that I have crossed paths with, really advocate for their constituents and just how involved they want to be, like how hard they work, what they're proposing for legislation, like taking that deep dive, like you had mentioned, into all of the pending SV and DB legislation that we have. It's been incredible. I never expected to see the volume of bills proposed that I did, and just how common sense some of them are, right? Like it's been something else. I mean, you hear all the time that, oh, politicians are removed from the rest of us. And I haven't found that to be the case at all in our own state, which is great.
And that's been one of even the points of this TV show, Representing Leominster, to really kind of demystify the process, connect people with their local elected leaders, state elected leaders, and say, we're just your neighbors who were crazy enough to run for office, right? And so you should get to know us. And so that's one of the really big points of this TV show, was to kind of pierce the veil of the mystique of the State House and talk about how legislation actually happens. And there's 6,000 bills proposed every legislative session, and a lot of really great ideas. And we rely on the help in our office to figure out how do we get the attention for this legislation that we care so deeply about. So I'm really thankful to have you working in our office. I think we're going to have a really great summer together, and I'm just really excited to see kind of your career unfold, and just really, really thankful to meet another survivor doing some pretty important work.
Well, thank you. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm very excited to learn under you.
Well, and thanks for joining me on my TV show so that my constituents can get to know a little bit more about what we're working on this summer. And so we've got one more graduate student fellow coming up, but thank you so much, Emily, for joining us today.
Thanks, Rep. Higgins.
And so we're back with my last graduate student fellow of this episode, Adrianna Spindle-Jackson. Could you introduce yourselves to the Leominster viewers?
Definitely. Hi, everyone. So as Rep. Higgins just said, my name is Adrianna Spindle-Jackson, and I'm a third-year doctoral student at the Boston University School of Social Work. And my journey to Boston in general, and then Rep. Higgins' office, started all the way across the country in California. So I'm born and raised in Oakland, California. Lived there for most of my life, went to undergrad out there. And that's really where I started working, or started getting interested in issues specific to Oakland, which led me to do some crisis work. Then ultimately moved to Michigan to get my MSW at the University of Michigan. Worked as a family therapist at an emergency shelter for youth in Ann Arbor for just about 3 years, which is when I decided I wanted to get my PhD. So I applied. And so that is a very brief look at what got me to Boston. And so broadly, the research focus that I've had at BU has been housing justice. And it really stems from a belief that everyone deserves a place to live. And as I was thinking about how I hoped to further my experience within this journey, I learned about the Rappaport Public Policy Fellowship, which allows graduate students in the Boston area to get or to have a placement within state and local public policy agencies. Was very excited when I learned that Rep. Higgins had a spot in her office. And so that was my top choice for the summer. And so that's how I landed here.
Yeah, and we are just so thrilled because a lot of our folks know that Isabel and I have been digging a lot into kind of homelessness policy and just really realizing how little resources there are for unaccompanied adults. That's kind of the term for adults without children, and how North Central Mass has really just not had a lot of services. We have one shelter for the entire region, and that's not adequate. And so I'm really excited to have Adrianna working with us this summer to really think about can we start a homelessness caucus in the legislature? We have this new piece of legislation. We're working with the Mass Housing and Shelter Alliance Mahasa that we ask kind of like, no rules, right? Like big picture, best piece of legislation. We solve adult homelessness. What does it look like? And so we just sent that bill. We were working with House Counsel, and we just got to send that bill to the clerk's office to head to committee. So we're going to start digging in, and we're really excited to have all of your work experience helping influence and guide us, and working with building out a network of folks to advocate for this legislation.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited to be a part of it. And I think that it, a lot of the issues and opportunities, right, that Leominster has, there's always opportunity to enhance housing, are issues that cities across the country are facing. And so I feel really grateful to be able to play a small part in all of the ongoing efforts that you all have been putting into increasing housing for this population in Leominster.
Yeah, and you're getting to see, you're going to come out to Leominster and see the pilot program that we're working with SMOC at the Days Inn, which was really kind of came out of COVID, and an opportunity where the Department of Housing and Community Development said, okay, you said that you really need extra homelessness services up here. Like, we're going to give you some money, see if there's actually a need up here. And within 3 weeks, we filled 26 beds. And so one of the other challenges is, where do we go from here? That was a temporary program with COVID specific money. And how do we continue to keep the pressure on the state to continue to fund additional programming up here in North Central Mass?
Right. And one of the things that I've been grateful to be able to hear more about from folks that I've been able to talk to directly from SMOC, who have been on the ground and really helped to get that shelter up and running, is how critical and important it was that folks were able to have their own individual space, and how that really provided an opportunity to not only first and foremost house them, which is was of course the primary goal, but then also to have some time and space to be able to address some of the other issues that were creating barriers for long-term housing. And so I think that it's been really important to understand all of the benefits that type of non-congregate shelter allowed for folks to create long-term stability, and really learn from that to push other opportunities forward that would create that same type of stability for folks.
And you started with that, right? That everyone deserves a home. Everyone deserves a safe place to call home. And this shift to non-congregate shelter that looks a whole lot more like housing and affordable housing, which we desperately need all across the Commonwealth. We got to figure out a way to do that more intentionally. And so I'm really excited to explore this new legislation this session and explore partnerships, because I think for too long, folks in Boston think, oh, well, we have a shelter in Worcester, so people can go there. Well, what if your job is here?
Right.
And you don't have a car, right? Like, all of these systems don't exist, that I think folks who are so Boston based forget that in Central and Western Massachusetts, we don't have some of that public infrastructure where you can get around easily. You can take the subway, you can take the bus. Just getting from North County to Worcester proper can be really, really difficult. And we just put a lot of hurdles in people's way. So excited to kind of explore and push the boundaries of what we can do here in Massachusetts. You've been with us for a couple of weeks. Is there anything that was surprising or notable about the Massachusetts legislature so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something I've sort of actually, like, at the end of each week, have sort of just been like touching base and reflecting on things that came up. I think one thing for me, which we've spoken about before, one is just to have a better understanding about what legislative process looks like, and to have a better appreciation for how residents and constituents can really play a pivotal role in not only pushing forward really critical and important bills, but also being able to convey what the contents of these bills look like for real people. Lives. And I think that being able to hear far more testimony than I've ever heard in my life, because it's something that we have access to, right? I think it's just, it put a different perspective on the role that that all of us can play within this process. And so that's certainly something that I'm going to carry with me beyond this fellowship.
And personally, I'm hoping that some of the things that we've learned during the last 15 months of COVID and virtual hearings, people have been able to have access to the State House in a way that they didn't necessarily have previously. And you can kind of hop into a Zoom hearing a lot easier than taking the whole day off to go to Boston, pay to park in Boston, get into the State House, wait for your chance to be heard. My hope is that we can really adopt some of these hybrid technologies to make it easier for our constituents to have their voices heard and feel like they're a part of the process, because you're right, they always were, and there were always ways to send in written testimony, to meet with your legislators, to urge them to co-sponsor, but the hearings are really important, and it's those personal stories that really create a sense of urgency. Over 6,000 bills were filed for this legislative session. A few hundred will be passed by the end of the 2 years. And so, right, how do we lift up these issues that we care deeply about? And it's often with those personal stories that are so important to move people's hearts, because all the data is good, but hearing what people's actual experiences are, that moves legislators so much more.
Right. And just a quick follow-up, what you just said, 6,000 bills filed. That was also a surprise. I just did not necessarily have a concept of how many are filed. And so I think that it's just been really exciting and energizing to dig into what all of those are, how many sessions they've been filed. You know, for some bills, it's not the first session that they've been filed, and just to get a better understanding of that process in general.
Yeah. Well, we're so thrilled that you chose to work with us this summer, and we could not be happier. And so everyone tuning in, you will see more from our graduate students kind of throughout the summer, but we're really excited about having all of their help this summer. So thanks, Adrianna.
For having me today.
Thanks so much. I am so thankful to Ty, Emily, and Adrianna for all of their work so far this summer. I cannot wait to have them helping our office throughout the rest of the summer and to really dig into all of the policy areas that they're really excited about. We are really, really lucky here in the 4th Worcester District to have them working with us. And if you, thank you for tuning into our June episode. If you need to get in touch with us, our contact information is going to pop up on the screen at the end, but you can always call us at 978-227-5278. We're still doing our office hours virtually for the summer, and you can sign up, and you can always email me at natalie.higgins@mahouse.gov. See you next month.